In a quiet neighborhood where rules kept the peace, and the HOA ruled with an iron grip, one man hung a simple wind chime, never expecting it would spark a full-blown legal battle. What started as a petty fine turned into a viral fight for fairness, exposing the abuse of power, hiding behind community guidelines. This is the story of how one Marine stood up, not with force, but with the truth, and changed everything. After serving nearly 2 decades in the Marines, Lance Waters thought he had finally found the peace he'd been fighting for. His new home sat nestled in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. It was the kind of neighborhood where lawnmowers buzzed every Saturday morning, and kids left their bikes sprawled on sidewalks without worry. It wasn't perfect, but it was calm. That's all Lance wanted. Among the few possessions Lance truly cherished was a small wind chime. It hung just outside his front door, barely audible, unless you stood near it, a gift from an old friend in his unit. It was more than decoration, it was memory. It reminded him of nights in the desert, the soft clinking of dog tags in the wind, and the lives that came and went. So when a letter from the Homeowners Association arrived, citing excessive noise and demanding he remove the chime or face a $500 fine, Lance thought it had to be a mistake. He brought the letter to the HOA office, expecting a rational conversation. Instead, he found Deborah Morgan, the president, gatekeeper, and, as it turned out, self-declared queen of the HOA. She didn't look up from her desk as he entered. "Miss Morgan," Lance began, "I got a notice about a wind chime." She cut him off. "Yes, that's correct. It's in violation of our noise policy. There's no decibel limit listed in the bylaws," he replied calmly. She finally met his eyes. "Which means it's up to the board to determine what constitutes a nuisance. We've decided your chime qualifies. What about the massive one across the street?" Lance asked, motioning toward a home with a decorative metal chime that clanged like church bells in a storm. "That one was pre-approved," she said with a smirk. "Yours was not. It wasn't about the sound. It was about control." Lance wasn't naive. He recognized posturing when he saw it. Deborah wasn't enforcing rules, she was asserting dominance. Still, he decided to keep the chime up, not out of defiance, but because it didn't deserve to be taken down. Not like this. 3 days later, the wind chime disappeared. Lance checked his porch camera. At 2:17 a.m., Deborah appeared on the screen, hooded, walking briskly up his steps. She reached for the chime, unclipped it with ease, and vanished into the dark. He watched the footage 3 times, jaw clenched tighter each time. Then, without saying a word, he uploaded the video to social media with the caption, "HOA President enforces rule by stealing wind chime at 2 a.m. Sound familiar? By morning, it had gone viral. People from all over the country shared their own stories. HOA fines for wildflowers, threats over holiday decorations, surveillance over fence height. But more striking were the replies from his own neighbors, people who had been afraid to speak up. One said they were fined $200 for a seasonal wreath. Another had been threatened with legal action over a community garden. Deborah wasn't just a tyrant. She had built an empire of silence. That silence was breaking. A local news crew showed up at Lance's door by day 3. By day 5, a lawyer called. Her name was Carla Denton. She specialized in HOA abuse cases. "I saw the video," she said. "This isn't just a fine gone too far. It's trespassing, selective enforcement, and a gross misuse of authority. I'll take your case pro bono." Lance agreed. Court wasn't a place he feared. He'd been in worse rooms. But when Deborah strutted in wearing her favorite power suit and that smug, unshakable confidence, he felt the old tension in his spine. Not fear, focus. The judge played the video once. The courtroom fell into silence. "Miss Morgan," the judge asked, "is this you entering Mr. Waters' property?" Deborah straightened her back. "I was retrieving a non-compliant object. HOA rules permit enforcement." The judge raised a brow. "Do they permit trespassing?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Lance's lawyer leaned in. We also have documentation of similar wind chimes being allowed, selective enforcement, and witness statements of threatening behavior. Deborah sputtered, trying to pivot. This is being blown out of proportion. You stole private property in the middle of the night. The judge replied, that's not proportion. That's criminal. The ruling was swift. The $500 fine was nullified. Deborah was fined for trespassing and formally reprimanded for abuse of authority. The judge also ordered the HOA board to conduct an internal review, citing the pattern of arbitrary enforcement and harassment. But the real verdict came after court. Outside, neighbors waited, one by one. They approached Lance. Some clapped him on the back. Others just said, thank you. One woman, who looked like she hadn't spoken up in years, whispered, you reminded us that we don't have to just take it. 2 weeks later, Deborah resigned. It wasn't a dramatic exit, just a letter, quietly delivered, followed by a for sale sign in her front yard. No one said goodbye. The HOA voted in a new president, someone younger, humbler, and eager to rebuild trust. One of the first motions passed clear. Measurable rules on noise complaints. Another, a neighborhood forum to review disputes before issuing fines. Lance rehung his wind chime on a calm, breezy morning. It rang softly as he stepped back. Hands on hips, two outsiders. It was just a piece of metal. But to Lance, it was proof that even small things are worth standing up for, especially when they represent something bigger. Peace. He sat on the porch that afternoon, the sun warm on his face, the wind gentle. Across the street, kids rode their bikes past blooming yards. Someone had placed a small gnome in their flower bed. Another home had strung up new chimes. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a quiet return to sanity. And every time the breeze stirred the air, the chime reminded Lance and the rest of the neighborhood that silence isn't always golden. Sometimes, it takes a sound to bring people back to life.